Hi, this isn't a piss-takey kind of warning. This is to tell you that this episode will include some very disturbing descriptions. Some of the things I will describe are really troubling, and I'll try and warn you as best I can when they arrive in the story. Okay. Click. 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 Hi, Time Magazine. Hi, Pulitzer Prize. Vulture stalked. White, piped, lie forever. Wasted your life in black and white. Click. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hello, it's Barry. Welcome along to the new episode. Hang on a minute, I'm only kidding. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am, as if I'd forget to say that. One of the girls I work with recently, she came up behind me, right, just as I was about to go into a class, and she whispered into my ear, "Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good?" I am. And then she pissed herself laughing. This was so funny. I couldn't kind of tell if she was taking the piss out of me or what, but anyway, I sort of laughed. Okay, good. Well, I hope you are well. Okay, big response to the last episode, The World of Escorting. Thanks for getting in touch and giving me your thoughts. As always welcomed. I love a discourse on something I've brought up in an episode, so please do not ever be shy about getting in touch, letting me know what you think. This week, loads of new members to the Facebook group. So welcome each and every one of you. I welcome you with all of my heart. My shout out goes to Amy Shelton. Amy on Facebook contacted me and said, through the Facebook group, "How do I get a shout out?" Well, Amy, you get it by asking. So there it was. Okay, this week's story. The story of ethics, the story of the journey of one man, the story of Kevin Carter. Are we ready? Okay, let's go. Okay, Kevin Carter. Who are we talking about? Kevin Carter was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. The place that he was born into and grew up in was described as a whites only, a middle class area. Horrible. Hate that term. Hate whites only. But the facts are the facts. This was South Africa, and it was 1960 when Kevin was born. Kevin was born a white South African. Now, apartheid had begun in South Africa in 1948. And as I said, Kevin was born in 1960. So he was born into what had been raging in his country for 12 years. Now, whilst the story that I'm going to tell you about Kevin isn't about apartheid, it is the context to Kevin's story. It is the backdrop. So please keep apartheid in mind as I tell you it. Quickly, what was apartheid? Well, after the National Party gained power in 1948, the all-white government immediately began enforcing the most horrible policies of racial segregation. And they called this segregation apartheid. Non-white South Africans, which were a massive, an absolutely massive majority of the population, were forced to live in separate areas from whites. They would be forced to use separate public facilities. Relationships between white South Africans and non-white, they were violent, they were bloody, and for 50 years this segregation would divide South Africa. I mean, so many other countries in the world were doing everything that they could to try and end apartheid. But for 50 years it raged on. So this is what Kevin was born into, and Kevin's parents were Catholic. They were liberal people, but they took little to do with the political climate at the time. How you can take little to do with it when it's the thing that's ravaging your country, when it's the thing that's actually in front of you on a daily basis, I don't really know. But they made a choice to not engage with it. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about in Kevin's story is about making that choice when you choose not to engage. Now, Kevin, by all recollections, he was a fairly politicised young boy. He was appalled by the crimes going on in South Africa, and he would ask his parents why they weren't doing more to try and help or to try and fight. But as whites at that time, they were in a position where they didn't necessarily have to. They could choose to ignore it. So Kevin goes to primary school and he does fine. He does well. He goes to high school and he starts to become a bit disengaged at high school. Starts to become uninterested in his studies. So he leaves high school and he goes through a few different attempts at a career. He initially wants to study pharmacy, so he gets on that road, he starts studying pharmacy, and then pretty soon he quits. He hopes that maybe one day he might become a race driver. He tries to pursue that for a while, and then that falls apart. He enlists in the Air Force, and he serves for 4 years. But at the end of the 4 years, he goes absent without leave. During the time that he was absent without leave, he tries to start a career as a radio DJ. But again, like with the pharmacy, like with the Air Force, none of this is permanent for Kevin and falls apart. Now, I get this. I think we all know that person who goes from job to job, never quite finding the right career for themselves. It made me think about, do you know the Baz Luhrmann Sunscreen song? Which is, it's the famous speech the man makes at graduation to all these people who are graduating, and it's supposed to be this kind of reflection on life and things that we'll do. And one of the lines in it is that some of the most interesting 40-year-olds in the world still don't know what it is that they want to do. This is the kind of idea I was getting of Kevin at that point, that actually he was just trying everything, but he was never quite satisfied with any of the jobs that he was finding. Kevin is about to make one more career move, and this will prove to actually be his final career destination, and that is photography. So in 1983, he is working as a sports photographer for some weekend newspapers. Now, pretty soon he decides he wants a job with a bit more of a challenge. And he takes a job with the Johannesburg Star. And his job really goes up a level. This is him now documenting through his photography the absolute brutality and the real reality of apartheid and its effects on lives, the country. And you don't need to be an expert on apartheid to understand this story, but I'm just letting you know that for a time in his career as a photojournalist, he was documenting some of the most upsetting and violent moments in history. He was taking photographs of people being killed in the most barbaric ways. He was seeing on a daily basis people in the streets killing each other with axes, people brutally murdering one another. So it's during this time that Kevin takes a photograph which is going to really be the catalyst for his career. He was the first ever photographer to photograph a public execution in South Africa. He took images of, and it is just horrific, it is the worst practice of killing someone I've ever seen. A tyre is set on fire and is placed around the neck of someone, and they burn to death under the weight of the tyre and the inability to escape from it. They burn to death. And Kevin was taking photographs of this. So when asked about these photos, Kevin says this. I was appalled at what they were doing. But then people started talking about those pictures. Then I felt that maybe my actions, they hadn't been all bad. Being a witness to something this horrible wasn't necessarily such a bad thing to do. I'll let you process that. Being a witness to something this horrible wasn't necessarily such a bad thing to do. So Kevin's images, they are gaining him notoriety. His images are starting to now be shown around the world, and he's being hailed as one of the men who is really doing a good job of documenting the trouble in South Africa with real honesty and real accuracy. And out of this, Kevin's not the only photographer doing this. There's a small amount of people doing this, and out of it comes the Bang Bang Club. So what was that then? Well, it's not the Bang Bang Club. Sounds like somewhere like really fun you'd go on a Saturday night, but that's not what this was. The Bang Bang Club was a group of 4 male photographers who all worked in South Africa, and they would go out into the streets to take photos of what was actually happening. Sometimes these men would be attacked while taking photographs. They would have their cameras ripped off their necks, but they still continued to go into the townships and photograph the violence on the streets. So there were 4 men in the Bang Bang Club. These 4 photographers were Greg Marinovich, Robin Comley, Ken Oosterbreck, and Kevin Carter. Now Kevin's images at this point, they're making big news. They're reaching the New York Times, the LA Times, Time magazine. They're being sold on to newspapers around the world. He's in there. He's in the fucking moment of apartheid. He's witnessing this death, and he's doing an amazing job of documenting it. So these photographs, they're being seen everywhere. During this time, Kevin gets married, and his wife and him will have a daughter, their only child. A daughter called Megan. Kevin gets described, it's interesting, he gets described as being like a child. People say he just had no guard up. He's driven by what he wants in that moment. He's impulsive. He just goes for what he wants in the way that, you know, if he's hungry, he eats. If he's horny, he has sex. If he's angry, he shouts. If he's happy, he sings. And that kind of drove his photography in a way. It drove him to just take more and more and more photographs, because when he felt those strong emotions of I must go and photograph this, he did. But Kevin was also feeling the real impact of the things that he was seeing. And sometimes when he was turning in his photographs and giving them over to be printed and to be reproduced around the world, he would be visibly upset by the fact that his photos were mainly of dead bodies. Now, the Bang Bang Club that Kevin was part of, they were taking a large amount of drugs. Out on shoots, they would be taking lines of cocaine between photographs. They would be smoking something called the white pipe, which contained marijuana and a tranquilizer. Kevin was drinking at this time large amounts of whiskey on a daily basis. The people around Kevin could see the effects of what he was living in a daily basis really taking its toll on him. When you see photographs of Kevin at this time, I suppose the best way to describe him is, I think he's really handsome. He's tall. He's just got a kind of air of life around him. All the pictures that you see of him, they show life and they show a sparkle in his eyes. But now something's going to happen that's going to really take a turn for Kevin. and it's going to change his life forever. Nothing is ever going to be the same for Kevin Carter after the decision that he makes. Kevin's been taking photographs in South Africa for 10 years. When he decides he wants to go to Sudan, why? Those around him ask him, why? He says, I just feel there's a story there worth sharing in Sudan. There's fighting, there's poverty, there's people dying every day, and I want to go and document it. So he goes and he begins to take photographs. He documents people living in poverty, bodies where you can literally see the bones and the rib cages of people. He takes images of mothers crying with their starving babies in their arms. One night, Kevin calls his friends back in South Africa to describe the experience in Sudan that he had had that day. Now, this is the point where I'm going to give you the warning. If you don't know this photograph, you're a grown-up. You can do what you want. You can go and you can look up this Kevin Carter photograph. Some of you might even have seen it. It's such a famous photograph. I think lots of you will have seen it and you'll know what I'm talking about here. If you haven't, I would warn you now, when you see it, you'll never be able to unsee it. So, if you want a reference point, if you want to know what I'm just about to describe, then go and look at it. Just type in Kevin Carter, Sudan, you'll find it. You'll find it easily. I warn you, it's not an easy photograph to look at all. But it is what it is. So during this conversation with his friends, Kevin describes that he just needed to take a break from everything that he was looking at. He just kind of wanted to wander away and be on his own for a few moments from the hundreds of people that he was seeing. And it's at that moment that he hears a high-pitched and really soft sound. And the sound, it's like a whimpering sound. And it's that of a child. And he goes on to describe to his friend the photo which he took at that moment and was proud of and wanted to share. The photo is this. An emaciated toddler in the Sudan desert crawls towards water, which is only meters away, but might take forever to reach. The child's head is down, and the emaciated body is struggling to move. Behind the toddler is a vulture. The vulture has its eyes focused on the child. This vulture is waiting for the child to die. In order to take this photograph, Kevin had positioned himself and watched the child for 20 minutes take one small move forward and then collapse. only to get up a minute later, try to move again, but collapse. The vulture behind the child continues to move as the child moves, never looking away from it. After 20 minutes and hundreds of photographs, Kevin scares the bird away. So Kevin has this photograph and he sends it to the New York Times. The photo editor at the time describes it the first time she saw this, the first time that this image was in her lap, her whole body began to shake. She knew at this moment that she had in her hands one of the most powerful images the world was ever going to see, and that this would be really, really big news. It was published the following day and the reaction was fucking incredible. It was soon to be seen in every newspaper around the world. It quickly became known as The Little Girl and the Vulture. It was described as being the best picture of human suffering ever taken. But the big question, the really big question, the one that was causing newspapers to be inundated with letters and phone calls is, did Kevin Carter help that child get to water? Or, for the sake of that photograph, did he watch that child struggle? The photo makes its way onto the front of Time magazine. And Kevin Carter hears the news that he has won a Pulitzer Prize for that photo. So by now, the photo and Kevin himself are known worldwide. I think you get about $15,000. Well, that's what it was then. It might be a lot more now, but at that time, it was $15,000 if you won the Pulitzer Prize for your photograph. And there's loads of categories in it, so each one gets $15,000. I mean, that's not too shabby financially, but it's more really about the recognition that winning that award will bring you. So, you know, everything that winning a Pulitzer Prize is going to bring you is, you know, you're guaranteed success. You're guaranteed to always work, whichever field you win it in. So winning it for photography, considering the amount of photographs taken in a year and submitted to Pulitzer to win it, a pretty big honour. Now, I hope I'm saying that okay. Now, I've always known it as Pulitzer. So on a website somewhere when I was reading it this week, it said it should be pronounced, well, this is how it told you to do it, pull it, sir. Like, pull it. No, hang on. Oh my God, I've developed some sort of weird stutter that I don't have. Pull it, sir. Pull it, sir. But I just think saying pull it, sir. Pull it, sir. Sounds really, I just think that's odd. I don't know. I'm just going to carry on saying Pulitzer, okay? but you know what I'm talking about, okay? That's fine. So Kevin is giving interviews across the world, and for me, they're a bit odd. Something just doesn't really sit right with me. He's, at one point, an interview asks him about that experience, that 20 minutes of watching the child and the vulture, and he gets up and he starts like reenacting how the child's movements. It's very peculiar. He's like, yeah, there was crawling, and then the child got up on its feet, and he reenacts the child's struggle. Now, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, he is definitely sparkled out of his face during these interviews. He's got a sort of strange energy when he talks about this photograph. I just find those interviews a little bit hard to watch because he's being so celebrated for this image and he's talking about it so passionately, but in his eyes, yeah, he's definitely sparkled. The UK band, the Manic Street Preachers, they were a really big British band. Amazing back catalogue. UK listeners, you'll probably know them. They released a song called Kevin Carter. I'll put it up later on all sorts of social media. Now, the lyrics to the song Kevin Carter are minimal, but they include the words, High Time Magazine, High Pulitzer Prize, Tribal Scars in Technicolor, Bang Bang Club, AK 47 Hour, Kevin Carter. Wasted your life in black and white. Click, 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 click. Once you've heard me tell you the rest of the Kevin Carter story, go and listen to the song. So here's where Kevin is at. He's about the most celebrated photographer in the world. He's just won the biggest prize, the biggest accolade that could be given to anyone. Among my research, I came across a woman called Carol Guzy? Gozy? I don't know how you say her name. Carol Guzy? Gozy? It's Guzy. Guzy? How would you say that? Guzy? Now, she's won the Pulitzer Prize 4 times. Or should I say the Pulitzer Prize 4 times for images. And they're in a sort of similar vein to Kevin Carter stuff. She goes to Kosovo, she goes to Haiti, and she photographs real people. But she talks about this idea of like, it's about, for her, trying to find the light in the darkest moments with her photographs. I mean, there's one that she takes, it's an incredible one, as a nun throwing food out to crowds of starving people in Kosovo. So yeah, I guess the reason that I'm bringing her up, and the reason that I'm sort of trying to kind of align her with the story, is that actually she again is a person who just feels like you're just there to document those moments. So back in South Africa, the remaining members of the Bang Bang Club, they're still out in the streets, photographing the violence, the horror. When Kevin's closest friend, another member of the Bang Bang Club, Ken Usabrek, he gets caught up in the crossfire and he gets killed. He's shot. And the other members of the Bang Bang Club, they try and lift him up into an ambulance, but the shot had killed Ken. We get into a weird post-modern world here. There's other photographers who are also documenting apartheid, and they actually document Ken being shot and the moment of him being taken into the ambulance. And actually Ken was there to document the violence. It just all becomes, I don't know, there's some sort of odd idea there just about that kind of like a photographer who's there to document death is then killed, and that gets documented by other people around him. So Kevin Carter is given the bad news about Ken and he takes it badly. I mean, of course, anyone would take that badly. Your best friend has shot. Now, the fatal shot happened in the morning. And by the afternoon, Kevin Carter is at the place where his best friend died. And those around him, they describe him as looking haunted. Like he had a face that was unrecognisable. His shock, his grief was unbearable. And a lot of that comes from the fact that Kevin would have been with Ken, side by side. They would have been there together at that moment, but instead, because of this new fame, this new notoriety around the girl and the vulture photograph, Kevin was off doing an interview, so he wasn't there. And that's something that he carried with him. So while this is all happening in Kevin's life, the other major conversation is still happening. Big question at the very centre of it is, Kevin Carter, did you help the toddler or did you just watch and photograph? So the Pulitzer Prize ceremony arrives, and this is Kevin officially being recognised and vilified all at once. Around this photograph and around Kevin Carter, there are two very distinct camps of thought. Okay, let's call them camp support and camp hate. Camp support, which is the world of photographers and journalists, are saying this: if that picture had never been taken and become so famous, we wouldn't even know where Sudan was in the world. Kevin put the suffering in Sudan on the map. Camp hate, which unfortunately is the majority of people, are demonising him for not stepping in to the aid of the dying toddler. And the negativity turns very, very dark. Headlines start appearing saying things like, the real vulture is Kevin Carter. Carter should have to face hunger like that child. Newspapers started using Photoshop software to replace Kevin's head on top of the vulture looking at the dying child. But back at camp support, they're saying the awareness the photo raises, it can only help the situation in Sudan. It can only bring more aid. Camp hate, they're protesting. They want the Pulitzer Prize taken from him. Camp support hit back with this: Kevin is a photographer, not a missionary. Is he supposed to go to Sudan and help every child? That's not his job. His job is to photograph the devastation. Are you saying he should have helped every child he encountered? What a lot of nonsense. He did his job and that's it. What you don't know is that Kevin spent hours alone in Sudan, crying, drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes, unable to escape what he had witnessed that day. This is the end of the discussion. But it wasn't the end of the discussion. It raged on. Kevin Carter's face was everywhere. He was still giving interviews about this girl and the vulture photograph. People around Kevin describe him openly weeping about the abuse that he was receiving. He was just being destroyed by the negativity. So when the question of, did you help the dying toddler, had to be faced by Kevin, he spoke to the press and he said this: I positioned myself and I waited for 20 minutes. I waited for the vulture to open its wings. This is the photo I wanted. After 20 minutes, I scared away the vulture. But no, I didn't help that toddler get to water. Kevin goes on to describe that after that 20 minutes, he wept, he prayed, and he smoked cigarettes. So just to complete the story of the child, the toddler did actually reach aid and survived the ravages of famine in Sudan for a few years before dying of malaria as a teenager. Fuck. Plenty of people who worked in the ethics committees, they were out in force with real anger and real rage. And again, similar to camp support, they said it is not the job of a photojournalist to alter what they are seeing. They are there to document, and without them, the world would never see the real horrors of what we are facing. So politically, what was happening back in South Africa is that Nelson Mandela had been elected president and a change was going to come. A massive political change was happening. And one photographer who knew Kevin really well said at the time, sort of felt like everyone's adrenaline levels just dropped. The things that they had been documenting and living through and seeing on a daily basis for 10 years, well, they were beginning to disappear. And the question was, well, what do we do now? Because for 10 years, all that they had known was how to document the horrors of what was happening in South Africa. Now, obviously, what they're meaning with that, I'm not meaning that to sound negative, they're meaning that in a, it's fantastic because possibly apartheid is going to come to an end and possibly, you know, South Africa is going to rebuild itself as a country. But as a photographer at that time, they were feeling like, oh, okay, well, we've spent all our time doing this. It now feels like that's something we're not going to be able to do as a job. So we need to be thinking, where else can we go or what else can we do? Now, Kevin was going through a really difficult period and it's fueled by the vulture picture. Also just feeling a bit lost, not sure what to work on. But also something else, he's now starting to feel the pressure of having to produce images that will reach the same levels of success as that image. He begins to kind of disappear for days at a time and no one can contact him. His wife can't find him. She doesn't know where he is and she's calling him and he can't be found. And he would sometimes come home and then just take to his bed for long periods of time and speak to no one. So it's in the midst of this that he gets a new assignment. And again, it's for Time magazine. They want him to go to Mozambique. They want him to document what's happening in Mozambique. And he's nervous. He's stressed. He's stressed that the expectation is on him that again he's going to win the Pulitzer Prize, that he's going to take a shot that's so incredible that it will give the world an insight into this thing, and it's stressing the life out of him to try and do that. But he goes anyway. He goes and he's there for 2 weeks, and he comes back and he has an absolute disaster on his hands when he comes back. He realises that he's left all of the rolls of negatives, all of his photographs, 16 rolls of photographs on the plane back. He has his equipment, but he doesn't have any photographs of the time in Mozambique. Fuck. So in a panic, he starts to lie. He tries to cover this up with Time magazine. He starts to try and delay things. He starts delaying, and it gets to the point where they're calling him incessantly and they're asking, where are the fucking photographs? We need the photos you've taken. And of course, he can't produce them. The plane that he was on, it's been emptied. The rolls of photographs, they've been thrown into rubbish bins. And so Kevin enlists his friends and they start going through rubbish bins, trying to find these rolls of film. But they're missing. They're never going to find them. Kevin's now got himself into a situation where he's told so many lies about the missing photographs. He's in a tangle that he cannot get out of. One evening he goes to visit one of his friends during all of this, and he's really upset. He starts to talk about everything. He starts to talk about the death of his close friend Ken. He starts to talk about the missing photographs. But mainly he talks about the vulture photograph. And he starts saying he can't cope. It's too much. He wishes he'd never been there. He wishes he'd never taken that photograph. And it's after leaving his friend's house, Kevin takes a short drive in his car to an isolated area. The following day, Kevin would be found dead in his car. He taped one end of a hose to his pickup truck's exhaust pipe and run the other end into the driver's side window. His death certificate names carbon monoxide poisoning as his cause of death. Kevin Carter was 33 when he died. He left behind his wife and his young daughter. His suicide note contained the following words: I am haunted by the vivid memories of killing, corpses, anger and pain, of starving and wounded children, of trigger-happy madmen, of police, of killer executioners. I have gone to join Ken if I am that lucky. Friends said at the time that they felt a sort of relief for Kevin, a sort of peace. A peace that he would no longer have to try and verbalise the horrors that he'd seen, and that he'd continue to relive over and over as a photographer. I'll take you back to an earlier quote from Kevin Carter. Being a witness to something this horrible wasn't necessarily such a bad thing to do. And so ends the story of Kevin Carter. Okay, yeah, heavy. For those who are new to the podcast, or maybe if you're someone who's listening backwards, if you're starting at the later episodes. If you go back, I did an episode on post-traumatic stress disorder in, what was it? Episode 25, I think. Yeah, I think it was 25. It was called Life as I Knew It. And it's stories of people who've gone through horrors, gone through things, and never been able to really recover from it. I feel like there's so many tragedies in this one story. It's just so complex. Like Kevin Carter's a tragedy, and everything that he was witnessing is a tragedy, and yeah, I would advise you to go and listen to the Manic Street Preachers song that I was talking about. It's just called Kevin Carter. And if you think you can stomach it, look at the photograph. There's whole websites dedicated to the work of Kevin Carter. And you'll see the breadth of work that he did in 10 years. And my God, the man took some incredible photographs. Get in touch and let me know which camp do you sit in. Was he right? Was he wrong? Should he have intervened? What should he have done? I know where I sit on this issue. And without sitting on... How many more times can I say the word sit? Without sitting on the fence. I know me as a human being in that moment, I would have picked that child up. But I can say that as someone who was at a safe distance from this. Remember that the man who didn't pick the child up had spent every day for 10 years witnessing death and seeing some horrific things. And maybe that was his daily view. Is that an excuse? Is that a reason? I don't know. Okay, let me know what you think. Right, so I received an email last week, and it was from Jenny. Hello, Jenny, an Australian listener who got in touch to ask me where the extraordinary person of the episode feature had gone. And it made me remember I said I would do this. I said I would tell in every episode the story of an extraordinary person. Now, I'm not a forgetful person, but I hadn't forgotten about it. I think it's just sometimes I tell a few stories in an episode, and then sometimes it feels like maybe we don't need the other story. But yes, I did say I would do it, and I'm not committing to it. I'm not saying I'm going to do it in every episode, but yeah, for this episode, I am going to do it, because I think after the horror of everything that we've just heard about Kevin Carter, it would be nice to hear something uplifting. So for you, Jenny, and for everybody listening, here's the story, and it's in the same theme as the main story. And it's the story of a man called Patrick Perry. Patrick Perry was a photographer who was working in Louisiana. Okay, so Patrick is on his way with his colleague Brittany. They're on their way to a job. So he's driving down the road through Louisiana, through a really quiet area. And the area's just got big stretches of road, not too many people about. And he's driving behind a woman who he is looking at her and thinking she's about early 20s, maybe 21, 22. The woman in front's car, it skids off the road and it hits into a tree and the car goes on fire. So Patrick and Brittany, they get out of the car, and Patrick says to Brittany, grab the camera. Grab the camera equipment in order to take some photographs. Weird that you would think that in that moment, but okay, I suppose if that's your job, that's fine. So Patrick rushes towards the car, and it's smashed up really badly and now really burning. So he's trying to open the driver side of the car, and it will not open. He says it did not want to open. So he's frantically looking around for something, anything that he can use to smash in the window. Now he hears a voice at this point from inside the car. And it's the female from inside, and she's saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm over here. She'd moved herself over to the passenger side of the car. And as Patrick gets round to the passenger side, she says to him, I'm 7.5 months pregnant. Please get me out of here. And he says, you're going to be fine. You're going to be safe. I will get you out of here. And so with massive struggle, Patrick gets the door open, and as gently as possible, he lifts the woman out of the car and he lays her down where it's safe. Immediately he calls emergency services and they arrive. The pregnant woman is taken to the hospital immediately. The fire is extinguished. Both the 21-year-old woman and her baby are absolutely fine. After the event, Patrick said, I don't think of myself as a hero. I just think I was meant to be there. That's a really quiet road. And if we weren't behind her when she crashed, I dread to think what would have happened. It could have been a long time before anyone else passed. And so that ends that story. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up for this episode. You know what I'm going to say? Find me on Facebook. Join the Facebook group. You will not be sorry. Find me on Twitter. Find me on Instagram. Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Put it in, you'll find me. Patreon supporters, thank you so much. Some new Patreon supporters this week, and again, I always say it from the bottom of my very soul. Thank you. Thank you so much. I just honestly, you really don't know what it means to me. It actually means so much. As always, if you know a good story, if you know a great story, get in touch. And I really mean that. There's going to be a development in the podcast. A little development I've not yet mentioned. But for it to happen, I need you to send me the stories. If you are this deep in to the podcast, you will know what Extraordinary Stories Podcast is about. I love crime. I love survival. The weird, the wonderful, the uplifting, the truly fucking unbelievable. If you know those stories, if you come across them, get in touch. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I was would imagine from the look on his face. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.